Well, good afternoon, everybody. How you doing? This is your boy Jedi Grand Velle. Welcome to Jedi Grand Velle Productions, and I got with me my special guest here, Mr. DJ Anubis, co-founder of
Where he's
Things
here?
Metal Tech.
Where is he at? I don't see him. Where is
You
he?
don't see him. You don't see the creator. You don't see the genius behind Metal Tavern Radio. I mean, he
No.
is so amazing, But yes, thank you for being on here, brother. Because I figure like you of all people that I know has this abundant fandom, or I'm not. Maybe I'm being too cordial when I say this. You're a fan of werewolves in general. I'm assuming, right?
Obsession. Yes.
Session. Okay. And just to let's kind of get a clarification and everything. This is what we're doing. We're talking about our fascination with werewolves, but the subject is really focused on one particular werewolf, not the males, not the brotherhood of werewolves. We are actually looking at the sisterhood of werewolves, female werewolves in modern society. I mean,
Yep.
this is a subject that I feel that is kind of not looked over. I mean, it's kind of looked over, but not talked about as much. I mean, true enough, there have been werewolf women in the past, but the funny thing about this is that they're kind of overshadowed by the brethren. Okay, let's look at some of the past werewolf films, such as the old 30s and 40s Universal werewolf films, and then we know the classic John Landis werewolf film, which is the modern society of werewolves. American Werewolf in London. That just
Yep.
led the staple of werewolves in general, and they were pretty much mostly male. But the crazy thing is that females are rarely talked about. I mean, they're talked about at least in terms of okay, they're just side chicks to a
Yep.
degree. That's
Yeah.
what they are. So I'll ask you this, News, before we keep going. Where was, or should I say, where was? When was the time when you came like I say, a lover of lycanhood? As far as you know, in the cinema or reading or whatever.
Yeah. My first introduction really was American Wolf in London back in the 80s. And didn't see it in the theaters. I was a bit too young for that back then. But obviously, as it started to come to like home box office and stuff like that through the HBO box and stuff, I got to see a lot of the horror films. I really grew up loving horror films in general. But between that and when I saw The Howling, and just was absolutely terrified by that movie. But I also had like this like drawn of appreciation for the werewolf, like what it is. And obviously, by the time we get around to movies like Underworld, where some of that's even more controlled, that's even more impressive. So like it used to be, if you're a wolf man or a werewolf, you were controlled by the moon. Like, you didn't have any control of your change. So, but whenever it came to a point where you were able to, this is sort of like the comparison of when zombies became fast. It
Yeah,
used to be like, oh, if we had a zombie apocalypse, I'm not worried. I can just walk around these shits and shoot them in the head and be fine. But when they got fast, it changes the whole dynamic. So
yeah,
when a werewolf doesn't have to worry about being strangleholded by just the turn of the moon, that can be frightening.
yeah,
So obviously, when The Howling and American Werewolf came out, that really kickstarted my obsession with werewolves. But even more so, like I love werewolves and not really wolf men. Like I do like some wolfman movies, but it's not the same to me as it watching a human turn it entirely into a werewolf. And
right.
so that's always been far more impressive to me than the other way around.
And see, this is the thing I've realized. Yeah, exactly. Looking at werewolves, it was primarily, I know for me, vampires that really got me started in feeling, something for some otherworldly creature. But werewolves would come into the play of that. And like I say, it's like you said, American Werewolf in London, and really, like I say, Howling, that really kind of cemented that with werewolves in general, where I became a fan of them. But the crazy thing about this is that the werewolf tone, or as far as what it is, you feel like it's generally one-sided. You feel like, okay, that's all it is. It's just the males, turning into these, unruly creatures. And as you mentioned, they're the ones that are usually, just, you know, I mean, like I said, I mentioned the Universal werewolves, where the guy has a shirt on, and he just got pants, and that's pretty much all we have. And if you remember, um, Monster Squad, where the guy
Mhm.
turns into a werewolf, and he just literally looks like the old-fashioned werewolf of the 30s and 40s. You know, they ask the ultimate question: why does he wear pants? And they ask the questions why they don't want to see his wolf nars or something like that. So
Wolfman has nards,
they
yeah.
will have nars. So the grand thing about it is that's the thing right there. It's like, okay, there's a limitation to that. It's like, okay, you're changing into another species, literally, as far as males go. And it's like, okay, that's it. I mean, shouldn't you really show the aspect of what this person is being changed into? What is, the overcome some? So, like I say, you don't need clothes. You're pretty much, when you change, you're naked. That's it. But American Werewolf did that, took away with that, and also with
And
the
he treated it right because once he transformed back to human, he didn't have any clothes. Whereas if you go to Twilight, Jacob, they were changing out of wolves to back to humans and they'd have their shorts on. So I was like, well, that's impossible.
right,
You know,
like this, like right here, the character of Leah from the Twilights. You see
right.
that's her werewolf form right there. But right here, she changes back and she's got a top. See, she's got a top on, but when she
Yeah,
changes, it's like, okay,
exactly.
the clothes pop off. But when they come back on screen, it's like, you're back in clothing, just like the guys in shorts. It's like, that doesn't make any sense, you know.
Yep.
And as I say before, I think that's a limitation in terms of, you know, ratings, because that was PG-13 and everything. So you can only
Right.
go so far.
Correct.
I feel that this kind of genre or this kind of thought process is meant for R rating, because that's the only way you can get away with the so-called, because let's face it, when you change into a wolf or whatever, you're going to primarily be naked when you change back. That's just the gamut. So, with that being said, where was, or I say, in terms of your thought process, where did you feel that female werewolves came into your rearview mirror in terms of coming up in a way fan or
How
just
they step
regular?
out. Yeah.
Okay.
Uh, the Howling again, you have Elizabeth Brooks playing Marsha
Yes.
Quist, who exudes sexuality. She's very comfortable in the fact that she's a werewolf. In fact, in the movie, she's one of the ones that wants to be natural. She doesn't care. She can mate with whoever she wants to. She doesn't mind being her true self. Whereas
Mhm.
for anyone that knows the movie, the idea was these people who were werewolves were being kind of held together by this psychiatrist who was trying to tell them they take him to a retreat on this island, and we don't want to expose ourselves. We want to be ourselves, but not to the point that we're being discovered. But they
Yes.
want to be who they want to be. They want to feed the way they want to feed. So, but she was really the first one that I saw that bucked the system in terms of looking at, say, our guy from American Wolf in London, David Naughton, from his character, which is more just kind of goofy and aloof, and he's a guy, and he of course acts like a boy when he's like trying to hit on his nurse girlfriend.
Right.
Whereas with her, it's a little bit different how they approach women as werewolves, which is kind of cool. I've seen it both in books that I've read, like novels and stuff, and then the movie. So we have that with her, and then you go to Catherine Isabel from Ginger Snaps, and again, they brought a different interpretation to how she dealt with werewolves. And so, she's being bitten, but they treat it as like almost like, oh, okay, this is more like her becoming a woman. Like, soon she starts to feel confidence, and she's using her sexuality now to exude confidence. The idea between menstruation and stuff like that. So the
Right.
director of that film used a different points of interest for women when they come into werewolves, whereas with men, it's always treated a little bit more masculine, a little bit different in the way they present themselves. They don't really touch on like hormones or anything like it. It's a whole different approach to the female version versus the male.
And this is what I want to ask you, because I know for me, the kickoff of, you know, female werewolves in general, I didn't really get the appreciation. When I say appreciation, or say the expectation in terms of liking it, wasn't until like late 2000s. You know, I mean, it really started to cement in me that, you know, this is a genre that I actually particularly like. You know, because it's just something about it that makes it, and I'm just going to say this: it's something about women who change into something other than that what they are. It's more erotic, you know, for some reason, in my personal opinion, because not because, you're going to see them, tear their clothes off. It's almost like, as you mentioned, something about, their expression, they're letting loose their demeanor or whatever, and I think, in a way, I think that's a good point you bring out, is that it's something about women, in general, because you see women in just in society, how they're kind of limited to expression themselves in certain
Mm-hmm.
aspects of life, where they could be a doctor, a lawyer, a police a person, or anything like that. And it's like I say, okay, that's a man's thing. That's a man's, domain. We just say it's true. It's, I mean, men are doing that, and that's usually where you go to. But that doesn't mean that they have to be limited to just that. They can be what they want to if they choose to. So women who do change into or become werewolves, in my mind, it's a expression in terms of that they have to let loose the side of themselves that they were so in kind of not so much scared, but kind of like, shy, or not so much shy, but kind of ashamed to be. But then when they let loose the animal inside, it's like, okay, this is what I really want. This is what this is. And I feel such an empowerment to this. And that's how I kind of look at it. And like I say, the fascination for female werewolves didn't really jump off till later on in the 20 teens, and it really blew up, in the late 20 teens, because that was my fascination of it was just becoming overwhelmed. And I'm just like, wow, I mean, I've never imagined that, this particular such subject is such a powerful thing, and I feel like maybe that is what it is. It's an empowerment, but I don't look at it as saying that women are going to be, overdrawn and saying they're just that, they're supposed to be sexualized. And no, I don't even look at it that way. I look at it as saying that it's it's a look at showing that, okay, you want to be seen, but you want to be respected too. And I feel like that's something that sometimes gets lost, especially, as I say.
Now, it's a great example because if you've ever seen Wes Craven's Cursed with
Yes,
Christina Ricci,
in fact.
that whole thing with the female werewolves in that also deal with women trying to gain power within the men's world.
Hmm.
And so that again, it's about also societal type things and how they're viewed and weaker than men or whatever. In this case, this movie treats it differently. It treats the werewolves as regaining power structures and stuff like that. So I always find that pretty fascinating as well. In the one episode in Trick or Treat from 2007 with Anna
Yes.
Paquin, it's more like a sisterhood. So their pack consists of nothing but females. So instead of just being about men usually are the pack and the alphas, this is a whole different approach to the female part. Like I love the whole concept of the idea between her character trying to play Little Red Riding Hood, but it's flipping it on its script, and she is the wolf. And
Right.
so I really, really dig that about that empowerment for the female perspective. And really, it's kind of neat in a lot of ways because of how we approach female werewolves as opposed to men. Because it seems like women have a deeper character when it
Hmm.
comes to werewolves. Whereas men, we kind of just treat it like, oh yeah, they're just barbaric. We just want to be slobs, drink beer, get rowdy. But women, they approach it way differently than we do.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. The approach of it is such a. It's not demanding, but it's like they're not going to sexualize it, even though we as men sometimes do sexualize it, but they're not doing it for that. They're doing it because I'm showing who I really am. I'm showing who I am into this world, because people might look. I mean, like you say, Anna Paquin's character, she looks at herself, it's like I'm just this quiet, very shy, But when you see her let loose her inner, being, you realize that I have more to who I am than just what you see on the surface. I mean, it's something more inside of me that's being brought out, and I think that's
Well,
something
that's
that.
always been, that's always been the women's greatest asset, though, is the sexuality. Because even in vampires,
Mhm.
obviously there are women that love Christopher Lee, and Gary
Yes.
Oldman is a vampire, very sexy gentleman. But women, it seems to be a bigger deal, especially for us guys. We're like, oh man, she's hot. I don't care. You can suck my blood out anytime.
Right.
Or if it's a werewolf, it's like, okay, I can join your clan, and even if I don't, let's just fuck first, okay? So
Yeah.
women understand that they use their sex as sort of entrapment, that they or their prey, basically, and it works to their advantage, and so they use it as such.
And I want to ask you this: like certain films where you can literally see the that kind of motif in some things, like Natasha. Let's see, Natasha Matliff from the movie Skinwalkers. I'm trying to remember
Hmm. Hmm.
that character there. You see that actually being played out, where they because the whole part of this movie is that they're trying to stop people who are pretty much trying to get rid of this so-called disease or whatever, because they don't want to be wolves anymore. They don't want to be turning into these other creatures. But her, like some others, they're embracing it, and you see her and this other guy who's her mate. They actually get it on at one point when they killed one of their own kind, and they smash and everything. But you see that dynamic where it's like I'm embracing this whole this whole thing as a whole, and not saying that I'm going to let it dictate me and who I am, because I say if I want this, I want this. I don't want someone to say I don't want that power to be taken away from me. And knowing that you have characters like that and other ventures, like the character from Howling, you see that they're really trying to say, I want to exist. I want to feel free from some shackles that, society has put on us, And I'm wondering, is that more for the women or more, or just in general, men and women who might be lycans, in your opinion?
I do think it comes down to the women and their personalities. Like we tend to look at women a little bit more tender, nurturing, and stuff like that. One of the better discussions is about Dee Wallace at the end of The Howling.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, why did she turn into what looked like a Shih Tzu instead of like a werewolf? And my theory has always been because despite being cursed, she wasn't the kind to like feed upon the weak. Like she was devastated that she knew she was going to turn, and so it was like sorrow.
Yeah.
So she really her outer skin for when she was changing was a reflection of her inner self. Whereas many of the other werewolves in that movie didn't mind being the predators. Like they wanted to feed upon the weak, and so that was like an inner thing. Like they just were not very good people overall. That's just how they were. And I just always saw Dee's character as someone who didn't want to live that kind of life, and so obviously this set up as her being killed on camera to try to prove the world that werewolves exist. But so much discussion goes into how she was transforming. And sure, you can sit there and say, well, it'd be kind of neater if she was turning into the regular werewolves, but that's not a reflection of who she was as a person. She was very innocent
Yeah.
in that.
And I think is that the same to say that the Christina Ricci character was kind of the same way. She was not embellishing on the fact that yes, this is a part of me, but I'm not going to let that dictate me in terms of who I am in that sense.
Yeah, whereas her coworker, who is another werewolf, I always laugh because it's probably the first time I've seen a werewolf flip off somebody, you know.
Yes.
So very recognizing the attitude of the individual that's infected with the lycanthropy. So yeah, it's all dependent, and usually men, again, a lot of testosterone. We're very uh, masculine. We always kind of exude like a bit of a combative type of
Mhm.
attitude.
I kind of
But
see that like.
if you were to say, let's just say you take a gay man and you make him a werewolf. Well, that could be totally different because they're generally a bit more timid and a little bit more sensitive. So how would that be in terms of a werewolf? How would that come out? I don't think I've ever seen a movie with that, but it'd be very interesting to approach it that way.
That'd be a good. That's an interesting point because I've seen not films, but I know about shows like True Blood where they had both vampires and werewolves,
Yeah.
and some of the male werewolves, they're jacked up, they're everything. I don't know if some of them have a you know kind of gay moment in there, as far as that. But I gotta say, I'm pretty sure they probably would because they've actually done that with, other female werewolves where they have a, some kind of, moment together, and I feel like that's something that they embrace because, yes, like I say, sexuality is depending on what you feel and how you feel. It's like it doesn't, yeah, being either a vampire or even a werewolf doesn't dictate that. All it does is just saying that, well, I am this, but I'm going to still be who I am, even though I am this particular, creature or this entity that is inside of me, and I feel like, no matter how you spin it, it's always going to be the sense of who is the person you know, that is the werewolf and everything. I mean, it's like, are you the person that is that person, or are you just the werewolf that's inside of you, or are you both? It's kind of like that thing about who is Tony Stark? Is he Tony Stark or is he Iron Man? Or is
Hmm.
he both? See, we can't really say which is which, but I feel like especially with women, especially in this form, they can, like I say, coexist together. And I can even take it further in saying that who is Superman? Is he Superman or I mean, is he Kal El or is he, Clark Kent? Or depending on your point of view, So it's always a fascinating discussion about what is and who isn't, and what makes a person what they are, And like I say, I think with female werewolves, it's a more complex. I think it's a more complex dynamic with them because it takes some time for them to actually gravitas to something more than what they are, from what I've seen, especially in different media, whether it be on television, film, or even in books or art, as far as
Hmm.
that goes. So but I want to share something here. In fact, let me go back to this is, I think I got it where it's on. Yeah, this is from American Werewolf in
In Paris.
Paris, and it's just a sequel to American Werewolf in London, which coincidentally, and from what I was told, it's basically the offspring of David Norton character and the nurse, so it's kind of weird, but it works though.
It's always had. There's problems with it just because one, you're using CGI for your werewolves, which always screws things up, and then the werewolves themselves don't look very impressive. So
No.
it's like that. But I can say I still enjoy Paris a lot because I love Julie Delpy. I love the acting, and I think it's still fun. It's still kind of funny. It has that humor that we got from American Wolf in London, but it does fail because it skimped out on the special effects that made American Wolf in London so great to begin
Yeah.
with. So that's sort of the problem there. But if you're looking for a cool female werewolf, well, Julie plays a really good one in that.
Okay. See, and I feel that's the thing. I mean, I think it comes down to, as you say, the performance of who's making who's acting in the parts, and like I say, some people, you know, through the ages, because like I say, we've had female werewolves through time, you know, I mean, in terms of in cinema or whatever. And the funny thing is, they just didn't get their just due because I guess some people didn't find them as fascinating or interesting, or it just didn't seem like you can draw out as much of what was there. You know, I mean, maybe this because you got to remember anything that was done with human. I mean, when I say human characters, female characters in cinema, they had to be set to a certain standard. They had to be set to a certain, mold in a sense. It's the
Mhm.
same with men. And like I say, as time progressed, you go through, women's march, standing up for, women empowerment and whatever during the 60s and 70s, all these things. I guess that would come to a change in the 80s and then in the 90s, and I guess got more emboldened. And I guess certain things started to really like I say, erupt where it's like we have more to say than just a pretty face and a beautiful body. We want to say we have something that offers to society than just that what we see on the outside. And I feel like when you see these female werewolves, I feel like yes, it's something more to that than just that. And like I say, we've had certain things like this, in cultures where it says, cultural history of female werewolves. I mean, that shows right there that someone just like you and me think about these things. It's like, oh, it's not just something that we as fans might like. It's something that we say that there's something because I've actually seen commentary, not commentaries, but documentaries where werewolves, and we're just talking about both male and female, where they it's like a really something that it's like you have to look deeper in the meaning of what it's being brought to light, And like I say, for female werewolves, yes, I'm guilty of, kind of almost lusting after them in a way, because I like the fact that I love the trans.
Obvious.
Yes, exactly. I mean, this right here, this, well, no, that's the wrong one.
Oh,
Sorry.
look at that lovely guy.
Yeah, right. No, this right here is just an example right here. This is a just in the between phase of a person who's, and it's a female who's just literally just starting to grow into her animal sense. But she's starting out, but at that same time, I see that change in her. It's like it's almost kind of scary, but at the same time, it's almost for her, you know, she's in embracing it. She's really feeling that change in her. It's almost like you said earlier, a woman is going to go through certain changes, certain modes, certain, aspects that's a natural feeling, although this is so-called not natural in some people's eyes. But we see that she's embracing it and seeing that I want to feel what this feels like to be, not closed up, and I feel that that's something I really feel that is sometimes overlooked. And I'm glad that people like you and me have the cojones to really say, I want to see more of this, I want to see more of what's going on. I mean, because if they actually do bring out, I mean, they doing that. I mean, because there's, believe it or not, podcasts and shows that actually embrace female werewolves to a degree, like Being Human. In fact, this character here, Erin, where she's a first time werewolf, and she's like I say, she's like a teenager, but she's taken on the embellishment of a lycan, and she's just like when she first turns, she says, I don't want to do this. I don't want to become this. But once it happens and once she changes, it's like, okay, I feel something different about me. I feel something that
Mhm.
is just there that I didn't know about myself before, And I think that's something I think a lot of people don't realize that whatever you were before in terms of confidence or, if you was kind of an introvert or whatever, you find something that actually unlocks that. And I feel like for her, this character, Erin, it unlocked that was there already, but it has that potential to just like give it a shift. And it's like, okay, here I am, let's go and play and see where it goes to. So
Yeah, the biggest detriment, unfortunately, for women in werewolf movies is one, they don't always get the luxury of great special effects. So when we talk about the wolves and how they look, it's not always a great thing. That's why a lot of times, whenever I come across one that's actually pretty good, I kind of cherish it a little more than I would cherish something else. But the second thing is, it's a lot like think about Ghostbusters 2016.
mhm,
That movie was supposed to be the original guys, but then
mhm,
the women became like an afterthought. So we said, well, we'll throw women in. Oh, the women did a great job, by the way, but
mm,
the script was so fucking bad that it just didn't do them any favors. So this happens a lot with women in horror when they're trying to carry a horror film, is they're not really taking it seriously as men are in the horror industry. So despite being a big part of that industry, because TNA, just we love the eye candy and stuff like that. When it comes to them actually kind of like leading that movie, we kind of say, okay, well, we'll just kind of do this and then whatever. But I do feel bad for them because there are times that women, like I said, do a very good job in acting and roles and stuff like that, but they're not done any favors because of the scripts that are presented to them. So there was a movie called Hunter's Moon that came out a couple years ago. Great concept, really. You just had this family of a mother, father, and a couple of daughters, and they were on vacation, and they were in the midst of some people going missing who were actually bad people. Like these were like killers, like serial killers, just being destroyed, and like the authorities don't really know what's going on. Turns out the family's a bunch of werewolves, and they're the ones taking out all the serial killers. But again, the script's kind of flimsy. It doesn't really do them a lot of favors, but I enjoyed the acting enough from them to say, well, this could have been much better than it was. And then the werewolf looks don't look that great either. So
yeah.
that's also the part that hurts it.
And see, that's the thing I realized too. I think that's come, and for me, it comes with a lot of maturity too. Because, as I said before, I I'm guilty of lessons, especially when I was in my younger days. But as I've gotten older, I realize I appreciate knowing that I want to see women get their due, especially wherever it might be, whether it be a superhero, and as I mentioned before, whether kind of occupation that they choose to do, whatever. I want them to, embrace that, but I don't want them to be feeling like, oh, because I'm a woman, I'm just, just something to be stared at. I'm just something to be, it's like, no. And that's the same with female werewolves. I don't want them to be feeling like, in terms of, I don't want to see them in that light that they're just meant for that, just to be, you know, Google eyed. It's like I want to say, it's like I want to see them know that they are appreciated as females, and it's like they are strong. I mean, yeah, true enough, they are the so-called weaknesses. I know some women don't want to hear that, but they are appreciated.
Well, it's all fine. Like the greatest tragedy about Howling 2 is that Sybil Danning was a very powerful
Mm-hmm.
female werewolf, very beautiful, sexual, but they basically just narrowed her entire character and script down to just that. Like it's like, oh, we're just gonna flash her boobs here a little bit and do this and this. And it's one of the reasons why Christopher Lee really didn't like that movie, is because it was just poorly written. And he could have, the possibilities would have been great to give her a stronger role in that uh clan of werewolves that she was running, the pack. And so again, it's just a disservice to just narrow it down to their sexuality. Like I read books, and I can't remember the name of the one that I really liked. I apologize for anybody that's curious, because I have to try to find it again. But the whole concept was this woman, very beautiful, uh, was part of the underground world where they had werewolves and vampires and stuff. But I liked the approach that, one, she didn't have to worry about a pack; she could be on her own and still hold her own. But then two, there's this aura with her, just like it is with the men, that like when she walks into a room with other werewolves, especially male or female, it's an aura of sexuality, like it's a drive,
Right.
and it's almost like in heat. So it still plays upon like the almost like animalistic part of the wolf, but still keeping human. But I just appreciate the story writing for the novel was great, and it was a really really great book.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish they would kind of just convey those kind of things onto film because it really does a women disservice when they just give them shitty things to work with.
And you know, speaking of which, just happen to have this particular character from Bitten, which I feel kind of actually embellishes that because she's someone who she didn't want to be um, a werewolf of any kind. You know, she wouldn't be no kind of creature of any kind. But the thing about it is, just like what you were saying, it's almost like when she steps in a room, it's like she's a drawn to for other werewolves, especially males, and she really takes in the fever of what she is and says like I'm even though I am this, I'm not going to let it rule me, but I'm still going. And I feel like she is an empowerment because the person who plays her, I forget her name. What's her name?
What is it? Forbidden?
Yeah, just Bitten. She used to.
Laura Vandervoot. Yeah.
Yes, Vanderbilt. She's even though she is that particular person, she does embody someone who's not letting her, you know, who she is, say, okay, even though I am this, I'm not getting this total shaft of what I'm being. And I think this show here, I feel is a good example of someone that, yes, you have other werewolves in here, but she's probably like one of the two or three that's actually exists in this particular genre. I mean, it's a show, and she's I mean, the CG's, it's okay for what it is because it's television, but it's not overwhelming that she's not getting the credit due. Although there's some episodes where people threaten other people if she doesn't change in front of them or anything like that. I'm just like, why? I mean, I guess she's like the key to the whole, liking salvation or whatever. But you make a good point. That's the thing that and true enough, she does. There is nudity in there. There's you see a flat, all that stuff. But I don't even look at it that way in terms of how she's showing herself when she's in a birthday suit. I'm looking at her knowing that she is, taking what she's been not so much given. She's been cursed with it too. She was having intercourse with somebody and he bit her, and well, the result is that. But she runs with what she has, what she does, and I feel the character is justified in terms of whatever comes my way. I'm not. I mean, I'm going to take this person out. I'm not going to be put in the box or anything like that. I'm going to do this. But as you mentioned before, it's sad that this show does pretty well as far as film. I mean, for females, but it's always been that telltale with female characters, period, in films. I mean, I give you a good example. Michael Bay. I don't know if you ever watch a Michael Bay film and notice that sometimes the female character or lack thereof, they're almost sexualized to the nth degree. And I'm just like, okay, can you give them more than just a polished look, chrome look and everything, and show that they actually have some talent, they actually have some kind of, you know, method to their madness and what they do. I mean, give them something more than just, oh wow, they look great. No, dude. I mean, give me something more.
I mean, like I'm assuming we're talking like Transformers, and so Megan, very beautiful woman. Part of that was for that particular film, and I know Megan was kind of upset with Bay. They didn't really get along, but part of that was Shia LaBeouf's character, who was his prepubescent boy who hadn't really had a decent girlfriend or anything, and he really had the hots for her. So I kind of understood the relationship that they were trying to convey on the screen with that. The machines themselves were going to be the stars. That was always going to be the thing with that particular film. But I get what you're saying. Like, with Bitten, the TV series, like, it's a decent series, but it's also a young adult series, so it's not written for many mature adults. I mean, you can probably still enjoy it a little bit. I did a little bit, but it does run into the same problem where like you're just kind of dealing with the same drama over and over and over instead of progressing. And this happens a lot with a lot of stuff. So I watched a portion of the originals, which is a vampire series.
Mhm.
Fantastic for maybe like 4 or 5 seasons, and then it started just kind of being rinse and repeat. And it's like at that point, I'm like kind of done. Like I'm like, all right, it's not going anywhere. We're not getting any real conclusion here.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, if you're writing a movie, like sexuality is not a problem. It's and you said the same thing. Like you can have naked girls, sexuality, but if you're only reducing your movie to that and you don't have a strong story or any like purpose for these characters, then it's not going to be worth your time. And that happens a lot with werewolves and female werewolves specifically. Like there are some good stuff out there. Like I said, gender stance is a very sweet concept in terms of how they approach it. Viking Wolf, which came out a year or two ago, it's
Yes.
on Netflix. Very good approach to it. We talked Trick or Treat and that segment in there. Cursed, of course, has some neat things there. West does with that, but a lot of the other stuff that even though I would kind of recommend if what people want to see for female werewolves, only because you don't see them enough. I'd say, yeah, watch these films, but you're not going to be blown away by the scripts that much.
Right. And when you brought up Underworld, that was something that automatically. The first one is specifically. Um, you have female vampires in there, but the majority of the werewolves in there, the lycans, were all male.
Yep.
And surprisingly, if you saw Underworld Awakenings, it's you get a brief glimpse of a female werewolf being taken down and whatever. And I'm just like, how is it that we didn't see no female werewolves to begin with? In fact, now that I think about it, in the Rise of the Lycans, you do have a moment of a female lycan in there that gives birth to Lacutus.
Right.
You see that,
To
but
Lucian,
after
yeah.
that, instantly she's killed off. She's done. And coincidentally, when we get to Blood Wars, which I got to say, I wish they would have stopped at Awakenings because that was
Well,
all
I
over.
actually liked Blood Wars better than Awakening. Awakening, I
Did
didn't
you?
care too much about. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we can
Although
go
I,
into
although I would never recommend going past 3. Rise is like really the tip off.
no
That's a
rises.
prequel, so I'd
Yes.
stay there. Just start with the first 3.
Well, the reason I say Blood Wars, I'm not saying it's super bad, but it did give us multitude of not just male werewolves, but also female werewolves. And there's actually a shot at the end where you see both male and female werewolves changing into lycans, and I'm just like, okay, why couldn't this been a coexistence of it in the previous film? But I guess
Think about that too, because you brought up a good point. So Blood Wars, doesn't matter how good or bad you like it.
mm-hmm.
How great would have it been instead of having like a werewolf male protagonist, maybe come up with a female one that works along with Celine? Like, how fucking great of a story or a script would that have been?
Yeah.
I mean, the opportunity is there, and yet they didn't think about that. And it's like I constantly like, I'm not one to push like certain narratives, but it's not like I had to have Celine falling in love with a female werewolf. That's not the point.
No.
The point is like a collaboration of 2 different species working together. But it didn't have to be a male. There doesn't have to be this male attraction because obviously Celine had lost her love at some point in the last film. So I just, but no one ever thinks outside the box with this shit. They kind of go with the cliche stuff that they want to use. And so it's unfortunate, man, because the opportunities are there to really kind of push a very strong female werewolf perspective. And they don't do it.
That's the thing. You make a great point. It's like it's almost like we should be ones writing these scripts and stories and coming up with them because it's like, dude, I see so great potential. It's like, dude, y'all just pissed it away, man. Like, what the hell are you doing? It's like it gets me just so bothered knowing that you have the opportunity to make these things happen. And it's like, if we're thinking of it, it seems like the people who write the scripts and get intels with thinking like, okay, you're getting kind of tropey, you're getting kind of, the pretty much like you say, shake and bake and everything. It's like you're not thinking outside the box to know that go differently, do something different than what it is. I mean, if we're thinking it seems like you as a fan of this genre should do the same thing. But as you say, they They lose. They're just like, and I guess maybe that's the thing right there with Hollywood. They're afraid like, well, if I do it this way, Hollywood's going to say, you can't do this. You got to do it like this. You got to be, pretty much in that trope world and go with that. It's like that. I'm like, hey, if you do that, then you're never going to experience something different, And I feel like maybe one day they will do it, but I mean, but it'd probably be you or me or someone in our group who actually braces it and say, let's try this little different thing here, But
yeah,
no. but no. Anyway, I want to share a few, like art renderings here of different werewolf types. I mean, like this. I mean, I love this. This is
that's freaking awesome.
And then you have this right here, which is just like a foreshadowing because you see the red moon in the background. It's like, yep, she's not going to want to be messed with, But I want to show, I mean, before I get to that one, I want to show this one here. This one I really love. This one, man. I mean,
that's cool.
You could, dude, she's, when I first saw this, this is something years back. I saw this particular art form and I'm just like, dude, she's ferocious. But then again, she's like, yeah, she ain't gonna take no shit, So,
yeah, right.
But and then you have this forthcoming of her changing into whoever, I mean, it's like, yeah, that's, like I say, I just love the embracing of how some women, will, or female werewolves will be. And then you have this where who's when I say the baddie, who is the one that's actually in a danger to you and me? I mean, the wolf behind her or the person in front who's in a way maybe a little bit of both, the Red Riding Hood motif, but might be a wolf in sheep's clothing,
Right. Yeah, I like that's a great concept too, even though in this case it's probably more like she's just a warrior but has a connection with the wolf behind her, but
right.
It still plays along the Little Red Riding Hood theme. And so again, that's what kind, that'd be a great movie. Like I would watch something like that,
I mean,
and so you got to think outside the box. Like it's unfortunate that Hollywood just doesn't become more original with some of their ideas. And I'm not saying that I'm a great script writer, but dude, the idea behind it is fascinating for me.
That would be something else. Like I say, yeah, a female warrior who has the, like I say, has the strength. So, like say Xena, has a blade slaying. I mean, whatever kind of thing. But in the back, she has the ability to maybe, but like I say, has a connection with other wolves or werewolves themselves, and maybe she might be one herself. But as I say, this is ideas that I feel that Hollywood does not embrace. I mean, you have people who have ideas like this, but they're so scared to just do them. And me and Kevin, will definitely, I mean, if you haven't seen it yet, Sinners is a perfect example of taking something that, as old as the hills, like dealing with vampirism and segregation during the 30s, but you mix the two together and you get something more, and you get something more of a gem that shows like, okay, this is totally different than anything we've seen before in terms of vampirism, or even talking about, something political or anything like that. It's like, embrace these things. You just never know what's going to work and what's not. I mean, we can't be promised that something's going to fly or not fly. If it's going to ground itself, okay. But if it does fly, you took that chance to find out, But again, this is the problem with Hollywood. And again, we'll be stuck with it. And as you mentioned before, I'm not a great screenwriter myself, but I had stories up the wazoo, and
everything starts out with ideas. Like if you ran into something, so let's say the professor, like he's actually a story writer, or Big Bad Wolf. You could come up with a concept, say, look, if I had the financial backing, can you write me a script, and one that's like, and you can help along the vision that you have of what's going to happen. And that's kind of like where stories are born. So those things can happen. Like you said, a lot of times, a lot of us in the fandom, just in movies and books and stuff like that, there's a lot of people. The person that drew that Little Red Riding Hood thing, like, had some sort of idea there, which was great.
Yeah,
and you can just run off of that and do something. And I think that would have been something that could be like a book or a movie of sorts, and you can work around it. But the concept you can build right off of that with no problem.
and that's the thing. I mean, it's not unheard of to say because I mean, I'm pretty sure you like me do appreciate a very strong female character, no matter what she's playing. I mean, it's there, so why not give that person the reins to play with that? Give that person a chance to say yes. I mean, because I mentioned before, like I mentioned Xena, the warrior princess. I came fascinated with that. When it first came out to the show. But then you had like things like Wonder Woman, I mean, that just dealing with comic books, and everything. And then you had characters in films like Ellen Ripley, she was a total badass, I mean, she was still a female, but she embraced the fact that she is female, but I'm not gonna take no guff. I'm gonna do what I have to do in order to progress whatever comes along. And I can say other strong female characters in films, I mean, you could say Princess Leia's a strong female character.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, she had to be saved, but you see that even when things are getting tough, she takes action to say, someone has to save our skin, shooting everything. I'm like, come on now. I
Right.
mean, you have these notions of good, strong female characters, but you got to, like I say, you got to let that genie out the box in order for it to really come to life. Because otherwise, how is it not? How is it going to? How's it going to see the light of day if you don't let it out? And I'm sad to say that we're just the ones just honing in and saying these things, but it's like I say that whatever's in the box is still in the box, and it's not coming out too soon. And whenever it does come out, you're like, well, I mean, hey, we'll just see how it goes from there. But like I say again, we're always going to be the ones to talk about it, but we're not always going to be the ones who going to, unless we start a fandom where it's like, hey, let's start this, let's put this into existence, and let's make this happen for other people to see. Because if we like it, I'm pretty sure someone else is going to like it too.
Yeah.
So, but hey, that goes without saying. But before we end this, Anubis, I want to ask you, considering, I mean, with the female werewolves and everything, in terms of good characters or just shows that deal with female werewolves that have them in there, what in particular do you like in terms of that brings that to light better or worse or whatever in your mind?
Well, some of the better ones out there, obviously, we talked about Trick or Treat. It's an anthology for Halloween, but it does have a segment about with Anna Paquin that we discussed dealing with werewolves. So that's a nice segment that's always talked about a lot. Uh, Even though Howling 2 does have a strong female like Sybil Danning, it's not very strong, but I'd still recommend people watch it just for fun.
Yeah.
But some of the better ones, Viking Wolf, obviously Ginger Snaps, that whole trilogy is very good.
Mm-hmm.
Cursed, and Howling 5, which is the next best Howling to the first one, even though it's not as near as strong, but it has a strong female werewolf in it,
Right.
which is sort of a mystery too. So it's a little bit mixture, but it's one of the better Howling films in the series outside of the first one. But like I said, Hunter's Moon is a great concept. Has some flaws. Blood and Chocolate, very interesting take on
Yes.
the floor. One of the more recent ones, Werewolves Within. Your AT&T girls in there.
Mm-hmm.
There's I Am Lisa, and then of course the old school Werewolf Women of the SS is the old school during the Nazi exploitation era.
Yes, I know. About
And there are books out there. I saw the one that I sent you. I don't know if I own that the history of she wolves, but I might have to
Oh
pick that
man,
up just to kind of learn about the
yeah.
history of it. Yeah. So that'd be kind of cool to have in general. But yeah, those are some of the better ones that are out there. And there's tons of books that are made for the younger adults with female werewolves and stuff. So if that's something you're really into, just go on to Goodreads or something and look it up. Google it or whatever, find some pretty good stuff. Oh, Hellhound by a good friend of mine, Lou Yardley, is an awesome take on werewolves. Now it's not specifically females, but it's still very, very good.
Okay.
Interesting concept too.
Well, that's good. I mean, because that's why I say. I mean, if there is things out there, whether it be books, art, or like I say, it's like I hope there's more of this in future terms because I love this stuff. And as you said, as we've said before, you love it too. And you embrace it and knowing that it's there. And I'm glad that you and I are fans who keep this kind of stuff alive. I mean, I'm just hoping more, follow suit and say, hey, I want more of this stuff. And hopefully down the line somewhere, I mean, yeah, we've had like some like Curse, we've had something like, Howling, but hopefully we have it where we really truly have a dynamic female werewolf film. And it's just like, oh man, this is going to punch you hard, and then you just like, okay, that's what I wanted. This is what I've been wanting for you so many times in my youth, and I was like, I get it now as an old person, but it's like, yes, it's here. I want to embrace that. So hopefully down the line we will get that. But for now, I guess we'll just deal with what we have, like with the art and with some of the shows we've seen in films, and just embrace it for what it is. So
yeah.
But with that being said, what you got coming up, Anubis? I know you mentioned something before coming up on your channel.
Yeah, so later today, Neko and I, we went to see Ballerina last night, the side quest basically to the John Wick franchise. So starring Anna de Armas. So we'll give our review on that, and I'll have it up later this evening.
Okay.
Also later this evening, Olvin and I will be doing our next Silver Screen Savants, which will be tackling Next of Kin, starring Patrick Swayze and Liam Neeson. So we'll be doing that review. And then Sunday, I'll be debuting my new What If series. And we're going to start with Scream. And I'm going to try to get some people on a panel to talk about that. I have some ideas of why I wanted to kind of do this particular What If. But I also have like a lot of films that I think I'm going to tackle regarding this series. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'll just try to see who wants to join in and kind of give their own what if scenarios about the franchise of Scream and how they feel about it.
Okay. And what time is that going to be done? Sunday?
4:00. So it'd be 3:00 your time.
Okay. The reason I say because I actually surprisingly now that you say that I have something that I've got coming up tomorrow with a friend of mine, Mark Justice, and we're going to be discussing Godzilla, and not just talking about it, but talking about the kind of not so much the history, but how it's fascinated us as kids and as adults now, so it'll probably be around that time when y'all do it. So I probably won't be able to join, but I mean, if we get through, I'll probably try to jump on.
Okay. Yeah, not a problem.
But also on my channel, but that's going to be on his channel though. But on my channel, I will be come next week, be discussing the Tom Cruise, Mission Impossible films for the past nearly 30 years of Tom Cruise as Ethan Hunt in the Mission Impossible films. And it's funny how most of these films were hit and miss. Although I gotta say, most of them were pretty good. Where the other ones, it's like you toss up.
I think for the most part, he's done pretty good. Especially the last 2 or 3 have been pretty good.
So he done. And next week, well, that's the next week. That's next Saturday. But that Saturday after that, I will be discussing the 50th anniversary of dun 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 Jaws, baby. I'm gonna be talking about that, and trust me, that's gonna be a talk through. Hopefully, I'm supposed to be having Thrash and a couple other people discussing it because there's a lot of history behind this film. I mean, let's face it, that film is just like it's very iconic. Let's just say that it's iconic.
Yeah,
and,
easily.
You can't discourage that. But also at the end of this month, I will be discussing and believe it or not, celebrating my 55th anniversary. I might as well say 55th birthday. And I'm going to be talking about the 40th anniversary of a film that definitely needs to be talked about because it's something that kind of brings into what we're talking about, where we're talking about female sexuality, Life Force. We're going to be talking about this sci-fi horror classic, and I know you're going to be hopefully joining us with that, and
yeah.
Like I say, we're going to have a good time, but hopefully, when we talk about it, we'll get the elephant out of the room really quick and just go through how this film has stayed so long and what it's been around for. So, but with that being said, thank you, Anubis, for joining me on this little tour of talking about this little, discussion. Because
Topic.
yeah, this topic. I mean, this topic is so far gone that it's not even talked about so much. Because let's
Well,
face it.
actually, it's not talked about a lot. So kudos to you for even wanting to do it, because I hadn't really thought about
Mhm.
focusing on this particular part of it, of the werewolf mythology. So great job on your part to come up and invite me to do it, because it's something I thought was pretty good discussion on.
Well, I think some people like us are dreamers, and we have ideas that others don't have because they don't, as you say, they don't think outside the box. So,
Yeah.
but with that being said, we're gonna end this. People, whoever watched this, I thank you for your time and pleasure embracing this, Anubis. So until then, I'm gonna leave you with saying, y'all take care, y'all be patient, and always, well, keep the female werewolves alive. All right. So check it out. Bye bye.